The rain pounded against the glass walls of Westbrook Tower, 68 floors of steel and ambition rising above Manhattan. Inside his corner office, Alexander Westbrook stood with his back to the door, watching droplets race down the window. Forbes had just named him the 12th richest person in America, but today that meant nothing. "Mr. Westbrook," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Alexander didn't turn around. "Tell her to make an appointment like everyone else." "I tried, sir. She says it's about Catherine Lewis." The name hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud in 20 years. Alexander turned slowly, his face carefully composed into the mask of indifference he'd perfected over decades of high-stakes negotiations. "Send her in." The girl who entered his office looked about 22, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a rain-soaked jacket that had seen better days. Her jeans were faded, her sneakers scuffed, but it was her eyes that caught his attention, deep brown and intelligent, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "5 minutes," he said, not offering her a seat. She stood straighter. "My name is Maya Lewis. Catherine Lewis was my mother." Was. The past tense registered like a knife between his ribs. "She died 3 weeks ago," Maya continued, her voice steady despite the emotion he could see building behind her eyes. "Pancreatic cancer. Before she died, she told me to find you." Alexander's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the edge of his desk. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I haven't seen Catherine in over 20 years. I don't know what you think I can do for you." "I'm not here for money," Maya said quickly, a flash of pride crossing her features. "I'm here because my mother made me promise to give you this." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather journal, setting it carefully on his desk. Alexander stared at it without touching it. "What is this?" "I don't know. She never let me read it. She just said it was important that you have it." Maya's voice softened. "She also said to tell you she was sorry and that she never stopped loving you." Alexander's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. He'd built an empire from nothing, made and lost billions, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "How do I know you're who you say you are?" he asked, his voice cold despite the storm raging inside him. Maya reached back into her bag and pulled out a faded photograph. She kept this. Always. The photograph showed a younger version of himself, with his arm around a beautiful woman with the same eyes as the girl standing before him. They were laughing, carefree, standing on a beach at sunset. He remembered that day perfectly, the day before everything fell apart. "Leave your contact information with my assistant," he said finally, not trusting himself to say more. "I'll have someone verify your identity." "I don't need anything from you," Maya said, her chin lifting slightly. "I made a promise to my mother and I've kept it. The rest is up to you." She turned to leave, her shoulders straight despite the weight he could see she carried. "Wait," he said, surprising himself. "How did she die?" Maya turned back, her expression softening slightly. Quickly at the end, "I was with her. Her last words were your name." The silence that followed felt endless. 20 years of questions crowded his mind. "I work at Moretti's Cafe on West 43rd, Maya said finally. "If you want to talk about her, I'm there most mornings." After she left, Alexander stood motionless, staring at the journal on his desk. He didn't open it, couldn't open it, until hours later when the office had emptied and the city lights sparkled against the night sky. The first page contained just one line in Catherine's familiar handwriting: "Alexander, there are truths you deserve to know." 3 days later, Alexander stood outside Moretti's Cafe, watching through the window as Maya moved efficiently behind the counter, serving customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked tired, he thought. The weight of grief was visible in the slump of her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. He'd had her investigated, of course. Maya Lewis, 22, born in Boston, raised by a single mother. Straight-A student who'd won a scholarship to NYU, but had to drop out after 2 years when her mother got sick. No criminal record, currently working 2 jobs to pay off medical bills, and absolutely, without question, Catherine's daughter. What the investigation couldn't tell him was whether she was his. Inside the cafe, Maya looked up and saw him. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by surprise. She hadn't expected him to come. He hadn't expected it either. Yet here he was, the journal burning a hole in his pocket. He stepped inside, the smell of coffee and pastries enveloping him. It was a world away from the rarefied air of his corporate headquarters. Maya approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "You came?" she said simply. "I read the journal," he replied. Maya nodded, her expression guarded. "And? I'd like to talk. When is your break?" "I get off at 2 today." "I'll wait." Maya's eyebrows rose slightly. "You'll wait for 3 hours?" "I've waited 20 years, he said. 3 hours is nothing." As promised, Alexander waited, taking a small table in the corner, ignoring the curious glances from other customers. The man in the $1,000 suit, clearly out of place among the students and office workers who frequented the cafe. His phone buzzed constantly, but he ignored it. For the first time in decades, the empire he'd built could wait. At precisely 2 o'clock, Maya emerged from the back, her apron gone, her hair loose around her shoulders. She hesitated, then approached his table. "There's a park nearby," she said. "We could walk." The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. They walked in silence for several minutes before Alexander spoke. "Your mother's journal explains why she left," he said finally, "but not why she never told me about you." Maya stopped walking. "She thought you wouldn't want me, that a child would interfere with your ambitions." She looked at him directly. Was she wrong? The question hung between them, heavy with the weight of choices made and paths not taken. 20 years ago, would he have chosen differently? He honestly didn't know. "I never married," he said instead. "Never had children." "That doesn't answer my question," Maya said quietly. Before Alexander could respond, a passing cyclist swerved to avoid a puddle, sending a spray of water over them both. Maya stepped back with a surprised laugh, then stopped abruptly when she saw his expression. "You have her laugh," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Something shifted in Maya's eyes. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. The barrier between them, built of years and secrets and regret, didn't fall, but a small crack appeared. "I'd like to know more about her," Alexander said. "The Catherine I knew. And I'd like to know more about you." "Why?" The word was barely a whisper. Alexander looked at the young woman before him, Catherine's daughter, perhaps his daughter, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years. Possibility. "Because," he said simply, "some truths deserve to be known." The weeks that followed were a careful dance of discovery. Alexander and Maya met twice more at the park near Moretti's, their conversations starting awkwardly but gradually easing into something less guarded. He learned she had her mother's talent for photography, though she'd never had the money for proper equipment, and her passion for obscure jazz records. He discovered she'd been accepted to 3 Ivy League schools, but chose NYU to stay close to Catherine. Maya, in turn, learned about the young man her mother had loved, ambitious but idealistic, driven but capable of spontaneity, so different from the polished billionaire who now commanded one of the largest private companies in America. "What happened?" she asked one afternoon as they sat on a bench watching children play. "Mom's journal explained why she left, but not what happened to you afterward." Alexander was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distance. "I became who I needed to be to survive. At what cost?" Maya's question wasn't accusatory, merely curious. He turned to look at her then, struck again by how much she resembled Catherine, not just physically, but in her directness, her unflinching gaze. "Everything," he admitted. "But we're not here to talk about me." "Aren't we?" Maya challenged. "If I'm—" She stopped herself. The unspoken question hung between them. Neither had directly addressed the possibility of their biological connection, though it shadowed every interaction. At their 4th meeting, Alexander brought a small box. "These belong to your mother," he said, placing it between them. "I kept them all these years." Inside was a collection of photographs Catherine had taken during their time together, landscapes, street scenes, and a few of Alexander himself, looking younger and far less guarded than the man he'd become. "She was talented," he said softly. "Yes," Maya agreed, carefully examining each photo. "She never stopped taking pictures, even when her hands shook too badly to hold the camera steady." She paused, her fingers hovering over one particular image. "This one, she had a copy of this. It was by her bed until the day she died." The photograph showed a sunrise over the ocean, the light breaking through storm clouds. Nothing remarkable to an ordinary observer, But Alexander remembered exactly where and when it had been taken, the morning after he'd first told Catherine he loved her. "I'd like to see where she lived," Alexander said suddenly. "Would you show me?" The apartment in Brooklyn was small but neat, the walls covered with Catherine's photographs. Evidence of her illness had been cleared away, but traces remained. A hospital bed in the corner of the living room, prescription bottles in the bathroom cabinet, a calendar on the refrigerator marked with treatment appointments. Maya moved through the space with practiced efficiency, making tea in the tiny kitchen, while Alexander took in the life Catherine had built without him. "She was happy, you know," Maya said, handing him a chipped mug. "Not at the end, of course, but before. She loved her work, her friends, she loved me." She hesitated. She didn't regret her life, just parts of it, Alexander said quietly, his eyes falling on a framed photograph of Catherine holding a newborn Maya. "Yes." Maya sat across from him, cradling her own mug. "In her journal, did she explain why she left?" Alexander nodded slowly. "She said my ambition was becoming destructive, that I was crossing lines I'd once promised never to cross." "Was she right?" "Yes. The admission cost him something. I told her it was temporary, just until I secured our future. She didn't believe me. Would she have been right about that too?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was heavy with rare honesty. "Probably. I became consumed. The company became everything. And now you're worth what? 12 billion? 13? There was no judgment in Maya's tone, only curiosity. "Something like that," he said dismissively. "It stopped mattering a long time ago." "When did it stop mattering?" Alexander looked up, meeting her gaze. "About 3 weeks ago, when a young woman walked into my office and told me her mother had died.